Good evening, Dr. Parekh. Good evening, Dr. Neeraj.
Good evening, Kashish. How are you? Good evening, Dr. Neeraj.
Good evening. Okay, this can be fine. Okay.
Neeraj, sir, would you like? Sorry, sir.
I'm just trying to share the.
Yes, sir. Perfect. Yes, sir. We can see your slides.
ठीक है जी.
Yes, sir. Now it's full screen. You can see it.
Now, how do I remove the screen sharing?
Sir, I'll just share it over your screen, sir.
Okay. So now my okay. ठीक.
Good evening, Dr. Ashwini.
Good evening.
Good evening, Dr. Ashwini.
Good evening. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
Excellent.
I just wanted to ask you something. Is this better or? Is this better?
The second one is better.
Okay.
Chances of you getting more proposals with this.
Okay. With gray hair and gray mustache. Very nice.
The contrast comes out. No?
Okay. Right. Purvish, just tell me, would there be a recording available to the faculty?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Ashwini, sir, would you like to share your screen just to test the same?
Yes, sure.
Yes.
Is it fine?
Yes, sir. Your screen is visible, sir. And now we can see it full screen as well, sir.
Sorry?
We can see it in full screen as well, sir.
Right.
It's
So you want to
perfectly fine,
stop
sir.
it now, or how do you want it?
So we'll stop it for the timing, and then you can share it at 7 p.m. again.
Right. So I'll stop it now from my side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you,
right.
sir.
Yeah. Thank you.
Ashwini, that was a lovely ESD. Very well documented also. उसकी वीडियो बनाई है?
किसकी?
जो ESD था, जो submucosal dissection था.
हाँ.
उसकी वीडियो बनाई है?
नहीं, मैंने no. I haven't kind of done that.
तूने फोटोग्राफ तो भेजी है ना?
नहीं मैंने नहीं भेजी.
तूने नहीं भेजी?
नहीं, अनिल
ये
अरोड़ा ने
किसने
भेजी होगी.
ओके ओके,
अनिल अरोड़ा ने भेजी होगी, वो कर रहा है.
हाँ फिर वो उसकी होगी.
हम्म.
तो नहीं मैंने कैसे सोच लिया तेरी है.
कोई गल नहीं जी, वो कहते ने कि सपने में भी ना भूत प्रेत आते ने.
अनिल अनिल ने भेजा हुआ है, ठीक है, राइट. मैंने कहा ज्यादा एग्रेसिव हो रहा है बंदा हमारा बुढ़ापे में तो.
ना जी, मैंने तो सर जी ऐसा है, 1st December I have decided to quit inpatient practice. I'll continue OPD but not inpatient.
मैंने तो बंद ही कर दिया. मेरा तो 2 साल से बंद है.
बहुत अच्छा,
अब
बहुत
तो
ही अच्छा.
सिंपल चीजें अगर अगर प्रोसीजर डायग्नोस्टिक बिना किसी सेडेशन के होता है ठीक है, नहीं होता है अगर सेडेशन भी मिलनी है तो हॉस्पिटल जाओ. मैंने नहीं करना.
ठीक बात है, ठीक है, that's fine. And I would love to take a page out of Purvish's book, but वो साला समझ नहीं आता कि कैसे ले, because he says that second opinion के लिए मैं हूँ, बाकी तुम खीरे खाओ.
सही है.
That is you. He has developed that stature over the years, so
Yeah. So that is why I said, now I very much wish to take a page out of his book, but पता नहीं कैसे करें.
Both of you are too kind.
नहीं sir.
No, this is realistic.
What is appreciable is appreciable. This is something we keep saying, but we can't implement it in our practices.
Yeah. See, another 3 minutes, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, 4 minutes. We'll start exactly at 7 sharp.
Yeah, just 1 second. I'll just.
Rashni's topic was interesting.
Yes, sir. This is going to become more and more challenging for us. What the corporate hospitals do in our name can get us into serious problems sometimes. Some of the corporate hospitals are putting photographs of their doctors on billboards also. Welcome, Dr. Lalit Kapoor. So kind of you to join.
No, I am a very vocal advocate of simply permitting advertising.
Ji.
Like in US, you have doctors who advertise. It will, you have already made it a trade. So
Right.
if this is a trade or a business, then let the principles of business apply.
Right.
And number two, the problem right now is you expect a young doctor to get his patients from word of mouth only. But that is okay when I have 30 years of practice behind me.
Very true.
That is not okay for a youngster who comes into practice today and he is expected he will be getting word of mouth patients. He just doesn't. Then he panics and he goes into unethical practices. So all this will stop if you simply permit advertising and let the person get his share from his advertising.
Right.
We keep clamoring that it is unethical, and but then making the profession a trade is equally unethical. If you have done that, so allow this also.
It's like exact opposite of BCCI, Board of Cricket Control of India. They are trust when they have to pay taxes to the government, and they are private parties when they have to retain the profit. For us doctors, it's the exact opposite. So we are beaten from all sides.
Dr. Lalit, waiting to hear your talk today.
Sorry, thank you. Hi, Neeraj, how are you?
Fine, sir. Fine. Absolutely
Great.
fine.
So at least
Good
we
evening,
meet
sir.
on.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Hi. At least we meet on this on the website. At least, if nothing else.
Right.
I know. Supposing this coronavirus was there 20 years ago, what would we have done?
Exactly. We'll go mad.
We would have gone mad.
This is not allowing me to join. I don't know.
To share your screen, sir.
Yeah, a mute share.
There's a green button at the bottom for share screen.
No, you'll be able to.
This one green. No, Microsoft Edge. Which one is it?
See, just move the cursor slightly. You will get a line below in which on green there is a comment share screen.
Okay, let me check.
Just move the cursor a bit. You will get the line below.
When the mouse
This is some.
when you
There's
move the
something
mouse,
else.
it appears.
Sorry.
When you move the mouse, then that whole bar will appear above the microphone.
Yeah, one moment. Hmm. Actually, I'm tech phobic. Tech phobia I have got. Yeah. Now I can see Purvish and join. It says Zoom join meeting sign in. Is that correct?
No, sir. So what you'll have to do is you'll have to go back to the Zoom icon where you can see Neeraj sir, Purvish sir, and Ashwini sir. Are you?
I can.
So, sir, is that? Yes. So can you see everyone in full screen, sir?
No, I can't see. I can see only myself and the name Kashish Parekh below that.
Okay.
Then Neeraj I can see now.
Okay,
I
so
can see Neeraj.
now, sir, at the bottom, can you see the icons where you just had started your video at the left hand side?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, sir,
So
if you go towards Now, sir, if you go towards the middle, there'll be a green color button which says share screen, sir.
That is what I'm looking for. It's now
Right.
This is saying mute, stop video, more. Shall I put on more? No.
Sure, sir. You can click on more.
Green is that with the right, is it? With the right.
With the
So it's an
arrow.
upward arrow, sir. It's an upward arrow.
Now I can see Purvish. Now it says Kashish Parekh.
No, sir, it will be on the bottom of your screen. It will be at the bottom of your screen.
Yeah, bottom of in that black window, is it not? It says
no, sir, absolutely. Yeah, black window. There will be
share
green.
Screen. Now share screen has come. Yeah. Okay. Share screen has come. There. I can see Ashwini.
Yes. So now we can see your screen, sir.
You can see my screen. Okay.
Yeah. So now only you. If I can request you to keep your PPT open, your presentation open, sir.
Open. Okay. First, I'll minimize this. Yeah. I'm minimizing and then.
Yes, sir. And now, so you can just open your PPT.
Yeah, but it's the thing is coming on my PPT. This.
No,
I must
sir. So
shift this.
once you open the PPT will come in front of the Zoom cloud meeting, so it won't be disrupted.
No, I know, but it is covering my PPT. This black thing where I can see Ashwini. 1 minute. So I can drag it a bit up, I think, or wait.
Go back. Go out of Zoom.
Okay. Yeah, I got it. Now can you see my screen?
Yes, sir. We can see your screen, sir.
You can see my screen.
Yes,
so
sir.
I minimize it.
Sir, for the time being, sir, because Ashwini sir's presentation is first, I'll have to unshare your screen, sir.
Okay, I'm minimizing. Okay.
Yeah.
I minimized. Now, why does this say Zoom, join a meeting. That how to ask. Can I cancel that?
Sir, sir, at the bottom, can you see a Zoom icon? Sir, if you at the bottom, you'll be able to see a blue icon, and if you hover over it, you will be able to see a gallery where you can see Parik sir, Ashwini sir, and Neeraj sir.
Okay, let me see
their videos.
Zoom, Zoom icon. I should press that.
Yes, sir. You should click on that icon, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I clicked on that icon, and no, it's not happening.
Sir, are you able to see my slides now?
No, I can't see.
He has clicked Zoom twice.
अच्छा, Zoom, I'll click it once. Okay.
आपने 2 बारी उसको क्लिक कर दिया है, आप 2 बारी एंटर कर रहे हो. You are already visible on our screen, so you have already entered the meeting.
Okay. So Zoom, should I click again?
सर वो जो आपके स्क्रीन पे आ रहा है ना लॉगिन वाला, उसको कैंसिल कर दो आप.
अच्छा, वही बोल रहा हूँ.
क्योंकि वो सेकंड टाइम आ रहा है. You are already on. So
but it says leave webinar or cancel. So what should I do? Say cancel.
Sir, sir, don't cancel. You can cancel it, and you can minimize the icon, sir. Sir, at the.
So I'll minimize this thing. Okay.
Yes, sir. You can minimize it now, sir. At the bottom.
I minimize.
At the
then
bottom,
still,
you'll be able to.
Yeah.
So at the bottom, there are a few icons.
Yes.
Over there is one light blue icon at the bottom. So at your bottom of your screen, this is a light blue icon. Inside that icon is a video camera. The icon of a video camera.
Yes, I can see that.
Yeah. So now can you click on that, sir?
Yes, I clicked on that once because Neeraj said I clicked twice. So I click once, but nothing happened. Yeah, I clicked once.
When you click once, actually, there should be 2 small windows opening. One is called Zoom Cloud Meeting.
Yes, that window is a Zoom Cloud Meeting is there.
Is there another window?
And there is a photo
Zoom
next to
yeah. Zoom webinar.
Yes.
Yeah, sir. Can you click on Zoom webinar, sir?
I will. Okay. Yeah, I can. I put, but again it says the webinar or cancel. I clicked on wherever you told me. So I all right. Now again, should I click on? I can see Parik, Kashish Parik. तो वहाँ click करूँ उसके बाद Zoom webinar.
सर वहाँ पे click कीजिए वहाँ पे.
On the picture, ना?
Yes, sir. Click on the picture.
Once only, ना?
Yes, sir. Once you can click.
The picture Neeraj, I can see Neeraj. तो उसको maximize करूँ क्या?
Sir, let us try one more thing. On the top right hand side, inside the black box, can you see the word view?
View, I can see.
Click on that, and then you will have options.
It says full screen. Okay, full screen. Should I say full screen?
Sir, you can say gallery view.
Gallery, okay. No, sorry, gallery. Yeah, now I can see. Good.
Okay, sir.
So I will maximize it. Very good. Okay, great. I feel good now. But now it says what? Leave webinar, that I should cancel, no? I think.
That you minimize, sir. Don't cancel it. Just minimize it.
No, I can't minimize because it's coming in the way of Neeraj, Purvesh. I can see all now. Ashwini, Kashish is not seen. Vinesh, Sophia. इसको कैंसिल करूं नहीं करूं क्या करूं?
सर कैंसिल मत कीजिए सर. सर एक छोटा सा सर ऐसा डैश जैसा आइकॉन होगा which says hide thumbnail video. Sorry, it says minimize.
Up on top, is it? On top,
sir. On top,
sir. On top.
Now it has gone, I think.
It's gone, sir.
Perfect.
इसको minimize करूं? नहीं, again.
Okay, sir, we can start.
Yeah, we should. Sir, if you permit, we'll start.
Yeah. 1 second. Again, that thing has gone away. I want to see you. Stop video. Just a
Can
moment.
you see the slide?
Huh?
Can you see the slide?
No, now I can't see.
Not your slide, but
It is saying nothing. I can't see. It says the program I can see 7 p.m. to 7.
Yeah, that's what. Yes, that is what.
Perfect.
That's perfect.
So I should press on that full screen.
No,
nothing. Do nothing,
don't do
sir.
anything, just
okay.
Right. So thank you very much. Apologies for a little delay for technical reasons. Today we are in the second day of the third Medical Logic conference, and we have three very eminent speakers talking about vital topics. So as you can see, the first speaker is none other than Dr. Ashwini Setia, and he is going to talk on a unique topic which I don't think many people have addressed so far, and that is the ethical and legal boundaries for marketing, doctors and marketing department of hospital. Is there a synergy? Is there a conflict? What are we supposed to do? So with that, over to you, Dr. Ashwini, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Parekh, for inviting me to address this gathering. And I'm actually, as I mentioned, I was excited when you gave me this topic. I would like to start sharing my screen right now. So when Purvish called me and he asked me, what do you want to speak on? I said, see, this is your prerogative. You can tell me what I would like, what you want me to speak on, I'll do that. And he gave me a googly, and next morning I had on the WhatsApp this topic. And when I was researching this topic, I thought my condition was, why is this not moving?
So can you use the arrow, please?
Yeah. So my condition was like the proverbial one of those 6 blind men who were trying to make something out of this elephant according to what they thought was the elephant, or what they thought was the trunk, or whatever it was. So that is what my condition has been so far. So before we go on to any subject, I think we must understand what we are going to talk about and how we are going to talk about, so that we can understand the subject. So I thought I would start with definitions of the subject itself, of the title itself. So ethics is also called moral philosophy, the discipline concerned with what is morally good and bad and morally right and wrong. On the other hand, the term law is derived from an old Teutonic lag, which means something which is fixed or even. And law is a system of rules which is been instituted to regulate behavior. Normally it is instituted by social or governmental institution. It is a rule of conduct which is uniform, very important, and is applicable equally to all the people of the state. Each law is binding, an authoritative rule or value or decision, and every violation of it is punished by the state. Bottom line is that ethics is what should be and law is what is. What is marketing? According to the marketing guru, Dr. Philip Kotler, it is the science and art of exploring, creating, and delivering value to satisfy the needs of a target market at a profit. Watch the words, at a profit. Corporate hospitals, I don't even have to define. It is in bold, private for profit hospitals, and they mean business. Mostly the line between profiting and profiteering is hazy to begin with, and eventually it disappears in most cases. A very beautiful definition I came across by Peterson, who said it in 1992. What are the professional boundaries, which can be described as limits that protect the space between professional's power and the client's vulnerability? I thought that was a beautiful definition. Now we come to the MCI Code of Conduct as far as advertising is concerned. Clause 6.1.1 says, soliciting of patients directly or indirectly by a physician, by a group of physicians, or by institutions or organizations is unethical. Actually speaking, my talk should have ended here, because this completely tells you that it is, as far as code is concerned, this is applicable to physician, the group of physicians, or by institutions or organizations, and this is unethical. However, there are certain exceptions to that, and is permitted to make announcements, only announcements, and that too in the press, on starting practice, on change of type of practice, on changing address, on temporary absence from duty, on resumption of another practice, on succeeding to another practice, and public declaration of charges. The next clause says printing of self-photograph or any such material of publicity in the letterhead or on signboard of the consulting room or any such clinical establishment shall be regarded as acts of self-advertisement and unethical conduct on the part of the physician. Clause 7.11 and 7.12 under Chapter 7 pinpoints misconduct. A physician should not contribute to the lay press articles and give interviews regarding diseases and treatments which may have the effect of advertising himself or soliciting practices, which we actually see it every single day. I have, just for the convenience sake, I have just given, this is not the last line, is not the Mci Code of Conduct, but it emanates from Drugs and Magic Remedies Objectionable Advertisement Act 1954. That also covers all of us. Now, you must be remembering what is this. So what people have done, they have resorted to surrogate advertising. Here, we all know what McDowell's makes, but what it advertises that is the soda and the spirit in a very camouflaged way. Spirit, of course, is alcohol. So the doctors also started circumventing the so-called codified ethics. And we have had hoardings which have kind of tried to communicate a message that ours is the best hospital. We are on your right side of the screen, it is holier than thou attitude, that we give you honest opinion and there's no commission to doctors. I mean, that has created a furor in across India. This particular thing in Tamil Nadu, this hospital was there. And now what do? You say, use somebody's doctor. This picture was taken by me just about 4 or 5 days ago. That somebody you are welcoming to your department and that keeps on the display for whatever time the contracted period is. Now, actually, this is not advertising. You're just saying you're welcoming. So this is what the corporate hospitals do. Here comes Best Heart Hospital. Now, there are pictures of the doctors there and they advertise themselves as best technology. But the problem is that even in those advertisements for other products like tobacco, when they were, or tobacco has been banned as far as advertisement is concerned, but something like pan masala, where they are called upon or in fact mandated to tell you about the side effects. Here we say it's best technology and there are multiple hoardings where you can see the CT scan like things or MRIs or cancer treatment plants where you feel that the side effects have not been told at all. Now, I want to ask one question. Are we a profession? Are we a service? Are we a business or are we industry? And it's a very poignant statement made almost 40 years ago by Peterson Starr, who says perhaps the most subtle loss of autonomy for the profession will take place because of increasing corporate influence over the rules and standards of medical work. Healthcare is not only being viewed, but it has established itself as providing potentially lucrative business opportunities. There has been a shift towards only revenue generation and not actually patient-oriented healthcare in very many corporate hospitals. Remember that large corporate hospitals build their reputation, as I told you, I showed you a picture, on twin selling points of inpatient hospitality, making very plush hospitals and what have you as far as service is concerned, the front office, this, that, and the other, and use of advanced technology. These are all marketing gimmicks. What is the current position? India is a free market economy. And in free market economy, ethics are bound to be diluted in favor of vested interests. And these vested interests are actually not illegal. In fact, they are legally protected vested interests. Nobody can tell you that you should not make a profit from your profession or business. And another question or another point, Consumer Protection Act 2019, and it happened in 1986 also, that my question is that if doctor has been bracketed and equated with traders, with businessmen, with other service providers, then isn't barring him from enhancing his business violation of his fundamental rights? So far, very important thing, so far MCI or any other body has not been able to clarify what is unethical about this particular advertising. Medical tourism, now what is the need for marketing? I'm wanting to be devil's advocate too. What is the need for marketing? Overall, currently, if you know that the government is supporting the growing private healthcare sector. Why? Because medical tourism is earning precious foreign exchange. The problem is, to our dismay, National Medical Council maintains regulations which are which are antiquated, which are from the prehistoric age, and it is anti-business. Now, suddenly people have been woken up to marketing because this particular thing, that the MCI also is kind of looking the other side, looking the other way, and not really punishing with alacrity or enforcing that act with alacrity, which in itself is codified as unethical. So therefore, the people say that, okay, if there is not punishment much, let's start marketing. Further, modern hospital marketing practices hold great value today, and need to implement these continues to grow. Especially because healthcare in India is not only at the cusp, I think there has been an explosive growth, especially in view of the medical tourism international. And also what they advocate is that marketing of hospital services would help differentiating the services for public, and that becomes an important factor of differentiation of attracting patients, the patients who the class they want to attract. I thought their word of ethics versus law is in order. Now, holding public health programs and seminars that are promoted in local newspapers is, to my mind, perfectly legal and effective way to promote various healthcare services. Instead, our medical council or National Medical Council retains a code which I said was not only anti-business, but is probably impossible to enforce. So what happens? This invites non-compliance, as I have shown you so many examples. But on the side, as a byproduct, in fact, it punishes those doctors or those institutions who are abiding by the law, by the regulation, because they are not able to attract patients because they are not visible. So big question is, what is unethical about that? We have a new kid on the block, social media, and the competition in this field has become very high. When I was researching for this talk, and it was for the first time that I came across, maybe I was kind of uninformed, there is something called as influencer marketing, which is not in the true sense actually an advertisement. So who are the influencers? These people have dedicated and engaged groups of followers on social media. So what happens is that a social media influencer wields influence through that media on which he is there. And when you hire an influencer to promote your product or brand, that is what is called as influencer marketing. The key factor is the bond of trust that he enjoys and authenticity that he has with his audiences. And therefore, those brands or those hospitals in this case leverage the same. Doctors are using increasingly social media, and they choose to have public profile. They have their private profile, but they choose to have public profile also, because this becomes a great tool. And this is done in order to increase their reputation and indirectly the patients. Remember that social media reach we all have experienced is exponential and has got a geometric progression. It is made viral in fractions of seconds. So, and very, very important thing is that social media marketing and advertisement, as I mentioned earlier, is not taken in this straight-jacketed and strict meaning of the words. So it is not seen as advertisement. It is not seen directly as marketing. And therefore, it is very difficult to pin down the delinquent, so-called delinquent doctor or the hospital. Well, there are, for any upside, there's bound to be downside also. So here, the forming of relationships is less formal. And therefore, with unclear power differentials, the boundaries in social media are different from other areas in professional life. Hence, the professionals like us are more at risk from developing relationships where the boundary of professional relationship drifts, mark my words, drifts from therapeutic to social to malign. Social media attracts, not can, it attracts predatory individuals we have seen. And they can malign you on social media, as a number of us or most of us have faced that. Now, we're talking about the corporate hospitals. This is a word about corporate advertising and marketing. There is some ethics in that, and an ethical ad in corporate advertising means that you don't lie, you don't make false claims, and this is within the limit of decency. And the ads usually are exaggerated, and a lot of puffing is used. But the problem is that there is no comprehensive statutory framework which regulate advertisements in India. Consequently, so far the advertisements were governed by sector-specific regulations. And the Advertisement Standard Council of India guidelines were issued, but they were just guidelines and there are no teeth which the ASI has. Then comes CPA 2019, which, remember, covers us as doctors, as individuals, but also corporate entities and the hospitals. So it says the law will hold manufacturers, service providers, celebrity endorsers accountable for coming up with misleading advertisements. They may be imposed with a penalty of 1 million for a false or misleading advertisement. They may also be sentenced to imprisonment for up to 2 years for the same. And for any subsequent offense, it is 50 lakhs and imprisonment up to 5 years. They can also disbar the endorser for varying terms, 1 year and for subsequent 3 years. Now, what is the action that has been taken, whether it is MCI, NMC, or the courts for that matter? It is just a rap on the knuckles. So you know that you will get away with a whimper, you will get away with ease. And I've just given you some examples where the MCI has penalized some doctors and their names were removed for 15 days. By the time people come to know, it is absolutely ineffective. People don't even know. The Tamil Nadu Travancore and Cochin Medical Council has censured 3 doctors for advertisements. They have censured only. And in 2 cases, apology has been accepted. And even in the court, they have just directed that such complaints be inquired and dealt with State Medical Council, and that's about it. I would like to point out that as the time passes, the lines between ethics and corruption are fading. Very unfortunately, participation of both doctors and hospitals in networks for cash for referrals, referred to as cut practices, has been long-standing. And they gave a very warped justification, especially for the youngsters, that refusal to engage in paying cash for referrals could prove particularly detrimental to young doctors without an established reputation. I think this is a very, very warped justification to my mind. If there is no cash, then there are cross referrals, and then there are indications which are termed as soft indications. And this all we have learned from the US. Then you manipulate social media reviews. You buy the likes and you buy dislikes for your competitor. I mean, imagine how far can you go down? Open questions that invite debate, to my mind, are ethics legally binding? Are codified ethics, as in MCI Code Conduct rules, legally binding? Can healthcare organization be governed by MCI Code, which is primarily a body which was to govern doctors, although it is there written in 6.11? Should corporate hospitals governed by corporate associations? And doctors are equated with traders. Should they not be allowed to market themselves as traders do? My final slide, ladies and gentlemen, is that at the end of the day, boundaries set by law are the same for both doctors and corporate hospitals, but they are hand in glove with each other in tweaking the ethical boundaries. Thank you very much indeed for giving me a patient listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashwini. You've really done a fantastic job of a very difficult topic, and you have rightly pointed out what are the pitfalls and what are the lacunae in the existing rules and the boundaries between law and what is ethics. I think as long as we can sleep soundly with a clear conscience, then we should be happy that what we are doing is absolutely true. While we are waiting for questions for you, we will move to the next speaker, who is none other than Dr. Lalit Kapoor from Mumbai. He is a very senior physician and a well-known medical legal expert. He has been instrumental in setting up the medical legal cell of the Association of Medical Consultants in Mumbai. And today he is going to talk about what are the consequences of bad handwriting as far as medical legal aspects are concerned. So over to you, Dr. Lalit Kapoor.
Thank you for inviting me. Should I open I think I should open the presentation.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can you see that?
Not, sir. So you'll have to share your screen, sir. So the green button that you had shared earlier.
Okay, first I'll minimize it again.
Yes, sir.
Share screen. Okay. Okay, and now I open it, correct?
Sir, have you? Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Now we can see your slides. So you can just make it full screen, sir.
Full screen.
Yeah. Sir, at the bottom, if you get your arrow bottom next to the 72% on the left hand side of that. So below. Yeah. So now you can click on the next. So on the left side of 72%.
Yeah.
So this one.
Has detected that your graphics may not be configured something. Yeah, okay. Can you see?
Yes, sir, we can see your slide, sir.
You can see my slide? Okay. Sorry, I am looking like a villager. Okay. Sorry, yeah, okay. So as has been mentioned, I'm going to be speaking on medical legal implications of bad handwriting. Now, just like the topic which Ashwini covered just now, this is again one topic which not much really discussion takes place on, though I think it's pretty important. And we need to keep discussing this, keep it in focus, so that we are able to prevent things which many people may not even realize that it's because of this problem, which can be a serious problem. Now, bad handwriting has been a subject of jokes. Whenever someone has to say you have to tell somebody you have bad handwriting, you say, oh, you got a doctor's handwriting, So it's almost like doctor's handwriting is synonymous with bad handwriting. So there are lots of jokes about bad handwriting, doctors' bad handwriting. And with the permission, at the end of my presentation, I would like to tell you about a recent joke on bad handwriting, which I read. And I'll tell you the reason for telling the joke also. But right now, we understand that bad handwriting, there are plenty of jokes on it, though it has serious consequences. And really, now here are a couple of comments. A leading pharmacist said, reading doctor's handwriting is like reading Arabic, as if we are writing in Arabic. A hospital administrator said that doctor's handwriting sometimes resembles an irregular ECG tracing, medical technicality or something, almost it looks as if it's a ECG tracing. It's that bad. And I have seen some really bad handwritings as well. Now, what is this? How is bad handwriting defined? The Western countries, they are so good. Everything they pin down to a very objective definition. And JACO, the American accreditation agency, has defined bad handwriting as the inability of 2 out of 3 individuals being unable to read your handwriting. So out of 3, if 2 say they can't read what you have written, then you've got a bad handwriting. Now, bad handwriting, apart from jokes, bad handwriting is not funny. Based on a 2006 report by the National Academies of Sciences Institute of Medicine, in the US alone, doctors write about 3.2 billion prescriptions annually, but poor handwriting on such notes leads to over 7,000 deaths and 1.5 million medical errors. So that's the effect of bad handwriting. And bad handwriting has a cost. It has a tremendous cost not only to the patient in terms of morbidity, in terms of mortality, but also tremendous cost to the doctor himself or herself. Now, I'm going to talk about 4 cases, four actual cases, which will illustrate the importance of this problem about bad handwriting. Now, the first case, most of you must be knowing, is the Harjot Singh Ahluwalia versus the Spring Meadows. Sorry, there's a spelling mistake. Spring Meadows Hospital near Delhi. I think it was Gurgaon or something. So this case, this small child, small baby, got admitted for fever of a few days duration, admitted to the hospital, seen by a pediatrician, a lady pediatrician. She came and saw the patient, and she wrote her notes and she wrote her orders, and she said she wrote down injection chloromycetin for so and so dose as per the weight, etc. Appropriate dose she wrote, and she went away. She was A, maybe in a hurry also, and B, maybe her handwriting was not excellent, you can say. So what happened was, a senior nurse who read the orders, she had to carry out the orders, she misread this chloromycetin as chloroquine. She thought it is chloroquine. And then her later in the court, when she gave her testimony, she said already Larigo syrup was already going on the child. So I thought it must be injection chloroquine. And it looked at what doctor has written, I misread it as chloromycetin. Now, as it happened, the dose which she gave, it was 3.5 times the normal dose, 3.5 times. The child immediately got a cardiac arrest. It took some time to revive the baby. And of course, then the baby was shifted to AIMS hospital and so on, and then was vegetative for a long time, The parents of the child filed a case in the National Commission and the National Consumer Commission. The National Consumer Commission awarded at the end of it 17.5 lakh rupees as compensation. And of course, the doctor must have spent several lakhs of rupees in defending the case. And eventually, this compensation had to be paid. There were other issues which are not relevant to this particular topic. But all this happened because of bad handwriting. So this is what can happen apart from the doctor suffering, maybe mental torture, maybe financial loss, as maybe loss of reputation, loss of practice. And of course, what about the child? Child vegetative because of bad handwriting. So that is the cost of bad handwriting. The second case, this is from USA. In 1999 in Texas, a cardiologist, Dr. Ramchandra Koluru, prescribed an anti-anginal tablet called Isordil 20 milligram 4 times a day. The pharmacist read the prescription as tablet Plendil, an antihypertensive which has a recommended maximum daily dose of 10 milligram. The patient thus received not only the wrong drug, but 8 times its recommended daily dose. After taking several doses, the patient suffered a heart attack. He died 2 weeks later. The court awarded the patient's family $450,000 as compensation. And this is important. The physician was required to pay half of this award, mind you, and the pharmacist the other $250,000. It was the first instance where a US physician was found negligent solely on the basis of poor handwriting. Subsequently, 6 American states passed legislation making doctors' illegible handwriting a finable offense. The third case. Now, this is Dr. V.N. Srikhande, who was my teacher as well. I trained under him, an eminent Mumbai-based surgeon. He spoke to, we had invited him for a conference, and the subject was on doctor-patient relationship, etc. But then he narrated this incident. He said he once operated a hernia on the wrong side on account of a handwriting goof-up, wherein right, that is RT, appeared to look like LT, left, in the notes of the patient. So the right side turned out to be the wrong side, since there was no hernia there at all. And to add to the seriousness of the situation, just imagine, the patient happened to be a High Court judge, Mumbai High Court judge. Just imagine. And this was narrated to a gasping audience by Dr. Srikhande. Of course, he was talking on doctor-patient relationship and how to deal with patients. So he explained as to how he handled the situation by taking full responsibility for the mistake. And after apologizing to the patient judge, he proceeded to operate on the intended side. Now you can imagine, why did this happen? Just because this RT looked like FT or the other way around. And therefore, the preferred way of writing this is never write RT or LT, say RIGHT and LILEFT, left. So less chances, but this is what happened again because of a handwriting goof up. The fourth case, this actually happened in a suburb where I used to practice. Now I don't go much there. This gentleman had a CLW on the leg. He was in a restaurant and some table, he got hit by a table. He got a CLW and he went to a nursing home. They sutured the CLW and then they gave him a prescription. The patient was prescribed some antibiotic, etc., other medicines. Among the other medicines prescribed was tablet Polymax 10. This is a vitamin supplement containing folic acid. Now, due to misreading of the prescription by the pharmacy, the patient was given a similar sounding drug called tablet Folitrax 10, which is an anti-cancer drug, though also used for rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, etc. The ingredient is methotrexate. After consuming this tablet for 2 weeks, one day, the patient suddenly suffered a convulsion while at home. He was rushed to a hospital close by, where after investigations, he was found to have severe neutropenia with accompanying septicemia and shock, undoubtedly due to methotrexate toxicity, and the patient succumbed to this condition despite all efforts. So you can see how the guy had just a CLW, which was sutured, he was getting all right, and unfortunately, because of this, this is what happened. And of course, to tell you what happened later, it was all over the newspapers. The owner of the pharmacy was arrested, and in one day or 2 days, next day he got bail, and eventually they also blamed the patient. He didn't do this, he didn't come in time, he didn't inform us, etc. Something happened technically, and nothing happened to anybody. And the doctor, of course, was nowhere in the picture. Nobody blamed the doctor. Nobody said, okay, see, your handwriting was bad, he read this, and that was the end of the whole story. So this is the fourth case, which again illustrates to you what can be the consequences of bad handwriting. Now, the other thing worthwhile talking about at this, since we are talking about this topic, is the potential for medication errors that can be another area of potential for medication errors that can be prevented is by being extra cautious of the misplaced decimal point. A 10-month-old baby died following administration of 204 milligrams of cisplatin. The child was to receive 20.4 milligrams of the medication, and while writing, the physician left out the decimal point. So therefore, again, the message or the precautions one should take is write 500 milligrams instead of 0.5 grams, as it may easily get mistaken for 5 grams. Do not use terminal zeros as 5.0 grams, which could easily get mistaken as 50 grams. Instead, write 5 grams. So even a thing like this can create a horror as far as the patient is concerned and as far as the doctor is concerned, who, as is always said, he is the second victim. So obviously, this is something which needs to be sufficiently propagated, particularly among the younger doctors who should learn right from the early stages. And it has been said, and I agree with it, that in India, there is a higher risk of bad handwriting creating problems. Because most of the chemists, we all know, everybody knows here, that most of the chemists, especially in India, do not have full-time pharmacists, qualified pharmacists who have undergone formal training, resulting in the uneducated salesman handling prescriptions. Now, you know, most chemists, they have these young boys who they hire, and of course, they're very intelligent, I must say. They pick up very fast and do all that. But at the end of the day, they are unqualified and they can make mistakes. And therefore, as somebody said, with an illegible prescription and an uneducated salesman, you can well imagine what catastrophic things can happen. Now, solutions. Firstly, highlighting the problem through various communication channels, which this webinar is doing, I believe, a good job, including printed material, seminars, workshops, etc. Just doing this would raise alertness levels and make doctors more conscious for the need of legible handwriting. And please remember, doctor's handwriting need not be beautiful. We don't want calligraphy. It just needs to be readable. A simple measure which can be carried out by us in India to begin with is to promote writing prescriptions in capital letters. Now, I've been writing all my prescriptions, anybody can check, in capital letters for now decades. I write only in capital letters. It has zero cost, and in any case, is now an officially advisory by the Medical Council of India or the NCM now. The Medical Council of India's latest order for doctors is that they should write legibly on prescriptions, preferably in capital letters. Now, the only thing is they're saying preferably. They're not saying you have to. And the Gazette notification regarding this came out a while ago. It says every physician should prescribe drugs with generic names legibly and preferably in capital letters, and she shall ensure that there is a rational prescription and use of drugs. Now, this is something which is there, but of course, it is followed more in the breach than in the actual implementation. But this is not surprising. This is India, where we don't believe much in implementation. We believe in bringing out beautiful regulations, guidelines, laws, but implementation department, we're extremely poor. So, and also, of course, like somebody said rightly, that there's also a practical aspect to it. Imagine in a general hospital, for example, public hospital, this poor house surgeon, he's got 30 patients waiting, and imagine he writing generic names in capital letters. You can see what will happen. He'll get beaten up for the long time that he takes to attend to the patient. But in any case, we need to give importance to this, and we should not wait for it till it comes out as a legislation, until it says that not preferably, but it has to be on capital letters. Of course, it is recognized that the ultimate answer to the problem of legibility is what in the USA they call Computerized Physician Order Entry, that is CPOE, and electronic health records. It has been stated that handwritten notes take 46% longer time to read than typed notes. Also, printed notes are supposed to have reduced medication errors by as much as 81%. And some doctors in the USA are now using handheld devices like the Palm Pilots to write prescriptions. Particularly, I know of a colleague, a cardiologist with a horrible handwriting. He's aware of it, he's ashamed of it, but he says he can't do anything. So he started using these devices where the prescription comes out on print. Now, the aspect where how patient suffers, doctor suffers, but this is something again I think is interesting. What is this is now I'm talking from my experience. Actually, I have seen this happen. The judicial fallout of bad handwriting. Two cases I will tell you. A surgeon was testifying in a malpractice case against him. As part of the proceedings, the judge directed the surgeon to read aloud a portion of the notes he had written in the case paper of the patient. As it turned out, the doctor was reading, the surgeon was reading, after every few words, the doctor faltered, as apparently he was unable to read even his own handwriting, much to his discomfiture and some amusement to the court. Obviously, when that happened, the surgeon suffered loss of credibility as far as his evidence was concerned. So this is what even the judicial, now there's something more I will tell you interesting. A gastroenterologist who was in court was asked by the presiding judge to produce the case papers of the patient. After turning the pages of the records for some time, the judge remarked in an anguished tone, said, "Doctor, if your patient records are so shabbily written, I can imagine how shabby the treatment must have been." Now, this was greeted by pin drop silence. So what the message is, shabbily written records denote shabby treatment. And therefore, not only the treatment should be good, should be efficient, but diligent, but it should also appear to be so. If you even got shabby records, it does not give that impression. So this is another aspect of bad handwriting and bad records. And this I read I was doing a Google search. I read in India, this is in India, this was the headline of a news report in the Hindu newspaper. It says, sick of bad handwriting, High Court directs 3 doctors to pay rupees 5,000 penalty. And then the report below said, sickened by the illegible contents on medical legal reports, the Allahabad High Court recently imposed a fine of rupees 5,000 on 3 medical practitioners, the writers of such reports in different cases, holding them liable for creating hindrance in judicial work. And there are other reports which I read, which the judges are frustrated. When in these cases, medical legal reports come from these so-called forensic people or other people, they can't make head or tail of it. And then they have to adjourn, and they're fed up of this thing. And so they fine 3 doctors 5,000 rupees each. And this is what is the consequence of bad handwriting, which is not much recognized. But I suppose if we keep discussing it, more people will come up with more type of cases where bad handwriting has had a very serious effect, both to the patient and to the medical action or litigation as far as doctors are concerned. And to conclude, in the context of doctors' prescriptions, bad handwriting, please note, bad handwriting can become a matter of life and death and a serious medical legal issue for a doctor, as we have seen in those illustrations which I gave you. Bad handwriting is certainly not funny, though some situations can be comical. And I will conclude with a joke on the subject, as I had mentioned, if I have permission to do that. And this is, and why I would like to narrate this joke. We've gone through pandemic and bad times. We have forgotten to laugh. We're only hearing of bad things. And even in seminars like this, we are hearing of what happened to this doctor. He was fined. He was, so there's all serious stuff going on. And therefore, I'd like, permit me to tell you a joke on the bad handwriting. Now, this patient went to a doctor, and the doctor gave him a prescription. And he wrote 4 items, 4 drugs, 4 medications, 1, 2, 3, 4. He didn't number them, but there were 4 medications prescribed. So this patient went to the chemist and asked for those medicines. So the chemist said the first 3, the last 3 medicines, he said, yes, I have this medicine. But the first one, he could not understand. So he said, or rather, he looked at it and said, "Bhai sahab, ye to abhi nahi hai. Main kal manga ke dunga. Aap kal aake le jaiye." So the patient took those 3 medicines, but he thought, let me try somewhere else. So he went to the second chemist. The second chemist looks at that. So he says, "Do you have this first drug?" So he says, he just carefully looks at it and says, "Ye company band ho gayi hai. Dusri company ki dawa de दूं क्या?" So he said, no, I want whatever the doctor has written. So then he goes to the third chemist and again gives him, do you have this medicine? He says, नहीं भाई साहब, इस दवा की बहुत डिमांड है, ये तो ब्लैक में मिल रही है, आपको चाहिए तो मंगा देंगे. And then he got more worried, and then he went to the 4th chemist, and the 4th chemist said, ओहो, ये तो कोरोना की दवाई है, ये मैं कोशिश करूंगा, लेकिन अभी तो नहीं है हमारे पास. Now this patient was really worried, so he went back to the doctor and he said, "Doctor, what is this? What medicine you have prescribed? Nobody has it, and they're saying all different things." So he just carefully looked at it. He said, No, sorry. This is not. My pen was not working. I was just checking, scribbling and seeing whether the pen has started working or no. And imagine, this is the response he got from chemist. The chemist almost said that they will I'll get it to you the next day. So that was the kind of experience he had. And I thought this was something which I would share with you. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lalit Kapoor. You made this topic very interesting. And I'm sure that the audience now realizes what are the consequences, morally, legally, and ethically, about not having proper handwriting. As some of our faculty colleagues have suggested, we could have a debate on this in the future as well, which could make it more interesting. In the meantime, we move on to the last topic for today, and that is what is new in informed consent. And we have none other than Dr. Neeraj Nagpal from Chandigarh, who is going to address us. But before he starts his talk, may I remind you that tomorrow is the third day of this conference, and we will start at 11 a.m. sharp. We have 4 topics for the third day as well, which are very interesting. So over to you, Dr. Neeraj.
Thank you, Dr. Purvesh. It is a pleasure to listen to the previous speakers who have raised issues which I wanted to butt in the form of a debate, but time constraints and respect for your organizational setup, I decided not to. So the topic which was given to me was informed consent and what is new in this. To discuss that, we are all aware that consent has been defined under Indian Contract Act as a contract between 2 parties. And we also know very well that all contracts are agreements, all agreements are not contract. We don't need to go into the details of this. If we go back into the history of consent, it was first brought up in 1914 by Justice Cardozo in a New York hospital case in US, where it was mentioned that every human being of adult years and sound mind and has a right to determine what shall be done with our own body, and a surgeon who performs an operation without his patient's consent commits an assault. This part of the consent was expanded later in 1957 in this particular judgment, also from US, where it said that not only the consent should be there, the consent should be given after adequate information regarding the procedure or the complications have been given to the patient. So the concept of consent was, the word informed was added to the concept of consent. After this, in 1972, California, this gentleman, Cobbs, he had a renal ulcer, and in the course of the surgery, his spleen was nicked and had to undergo another surgery, following which he developed a gastric ulcer. And he felt that he had not been sufficiently warned of the possible risks of his initial operation. Also in 1972, the Canterbury case came up where the patient underwent a laminectomy for back pain and after operation fell out of bed and was paralyzed. He also claimed to have been insufficiently warned regarding the dangers of the operation. So at this stage, the consents were being taken, patients were being informed regarding the risks of the procedure, but in both these cases, the issue was the information given to the patients was not adequate. The courts agreed and changed the standard of disclosure from physician-based, which is what do doctors normally disclose, to patient-based, what would a competent patient need to know to make a rational decision. This concept came in 1972 with these judgments. Following this, 1985, Sidway versus Bethlehem Royal Hospital Governors, this was now UK. And here, the issue was, in USA by 1972, it was already established that informed consent means all information given to a competent patient and allowing him to take rational decisions has to be given. Here, this patient underwent cervical decompression, developed paraplegia, and claimed that less than 1% incident of this complication was not explained. Rejecting her claim for damages, the court held that consent did not require an elaborate explanation of remote side effects. This is where the concept of real consent, which we say is the UK standard, came in. And the only effect that mention of risks can have on the patient's mind can be in deterring the patient from undergoing the treatment, which in the expert opinion is not in patient's interest to undergo. Next came 2015, the Montgomery case. In this, a woman with diabetes and of small stature, she delivered her son vaginally, and the son experienced complications owing to the shoulder dystocia, resulting in injury and consequent cerebral palsy. Her obstetrician had not disclosed the increased risk of this complication in vaginal delivery, and despite Montgomery asking if the baby's size was a potential problem, she finally sued for negligence, arguing that if she had known of the increased risk, she would have requested a cesarean section, and the Supreme Court of UK announced a judgment in her favor in March 2015. It established that rather than being a matter for clinical judgment to be assessed by professional medical opinion, a patient should be told whatever they want to know, not what the doctor thinks they should be told. This was a paradigm shift from what the status was in United Kingdom and what we were also following. We were following the UK system of the real consent, real and valid consent. In Montgomery's case, for the first time, they went beyond the real and valid consent and said it is not for a matter of for the doctors to be deciding what is adequate information for the patient, but it is for the patient. What they wish to know, everything should be told to them. 2016, Oklahoma Supreme Court, Allen versus Harrison. This went a step further in the sense, what happened in this case, the patient had ingested a nail and doctor advised you eat fiber and the nail will come out. The physician, of course, this did not happen and there were some problems, and the physician argued in court he did not have any obligation to tell the patient about alternative treatment methods outside his scope of practice, like endoscopic or surgical removal. Already in USA, the concept of informed consent, where the maximum information available had provided regarding the procedure. The issue here was you are doing certain procedures in your setup, and are you obliged to tell about procedures you are not doing but which are available in other centers? So in this particular case, the difference was brought out, and as discussed between informed consent and real consent in the past also, would a reasonable patient have made a different decision if informed about that particular complication? This is a patient-centric and this is informed consent. And would other doctors disclose that particular risk? Is a doctor-centric real consent. The real consent was, as I already discussed, what was being followed in UK till the Montgomery's case, and which is what is followed in India today. And in Samira Kohli versus Prabha Manchanda judgment of Supreme Court, even in that, it had warned very clearly, there was a line which I am repeating here, that we can move from real and valid consent to informed consent if commercialization of medicine continues in India. This line we missed in the regular reading, but this is a very significant line. And why I have given all these foreign examples, these foreign judgments, is because India follows the law on consent from UK and USA, of course. But the point is, the changing stance in UK is bound to affect us in India also. This 2016 judgment said very clearly that informed consent applies equally to invasive as well as non-invasive medical treatments. and treatment alternatives, regardless of the patient's scope of practice. A patient must disclose medically reasonable alternatives, regardless of whether it is the physician's preferred method of treatment, and the ultimate decision of what treatment a patient receives rests with the patient and not the physician. Against this, no Indian case law is as yet available, but this is what we should be expecting in future. We should be expecting as new which will come. Let us look at this particular case. This is Punjab and Haryana High Court 2019. As I already mentioned, the Bolam's test was being applied when we were using the real and valid consent versus the Montgomery and the Jacob Matthew judgment, what it said. In this particular case, the court says, be that as it may be, in view of the mandate of Article 141, after discussing the Montgomery's case in detail, the Punjab and Haryana High Court says, even though it is bound to favor the Montgomery's judgment to be applied in India, but since Section 141 of the Constitution mandates that it has to follow the law as laid down in Supreme Court, and Supreme Court has laid down the Jacob Matthews case, hence instead of Montgomery, we will follow the Jacob Matthew case and ask the police in this particular case to go for a medical board's opinion. Point what I'm trying to raise is the Montgomery judgment is now repeatedly being quoted in various judgments in Indian courts. I will show this in more detail. Of course, all of us are well aware of the Samira Kohli versus Dr. Prabha Manchanda judgment, which is basically what laid down the law for consent in India. And rushing through this, we know that the consent to be obtained should have been real and valid, which means the patient should have the capacity and competence to consent, compos mentis. His consent should be voluntary and on the basis of adequate information. Nature of and procedure of the treatment and its purpose, benefits and effects should be disclosed. Alternatives, if any available, should be disclosed. An outline of subsequent substantial risks should be told. Adverse consequences of refusing treatment should be told. Let me interject here and mention that sometimes I have read and heard experts speak about a 10% complication as a cutoff figure. I don't know where this figure has come from. Personally, if in my opinion an elective procedure has a 10% complication rate, that procedure probably should not be done at all. Let us say if we talk of CBD injury or a colonic perforation in a colonoscopy, none of these incidents is then point fraction of a percentage in all the procedures done. But all of these need to be told. And if the procedure entailed a 10% colonic perforation following a colonoscopy, the colonoscopy as a procedure would have been abandoned years ago. Also in this judgment was mentioned very clearly that there is no need to explain remote or theoretical risks involved which may frighten or confuse a patient and result in refusal of consent for necessary treatment. Similarly, there is also no need to explain the remote or theoretical risks of refusal to take treatment which may persuade a patient to undergo a fanciful or unnecessary treatment. This was the gist of the real and valid consent which Samira Kohli judgment laid down for India. And it said very clearly that it is for the doctor to decide with reference to the condition of the patient, nature of the illness, and the prevailing established practices, how much information regarding risks and consequences should be given to the patients, and how they should be couched, having best interests of the patient in mind. So we were following from this time, 2008, the real consent as our gold standard. And of course, we know in this, it was very clearly mentioned that you can do only a procedure for which you have taken consent. You cannot extend the procedure. And they had given examples also what kind of complications needed to be disclosed, what did not need to be disclosed. We had other examples where surgery was extended beyond the consent and compensations were awarded. One of the recent judgments of on consent was, and which was very highly debated, was this Vinod Khanna versus R.G. Stone Urology and Laparoscopy Center by National Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission. Now, this gentleman was HIV positive with skin cancer, and the patient had a prostatic abscess, which was drained and prostatectomy was done. After some time, the patient developed a ureterorectal fistula, and multiple hospitalizations and procedures were done on this. Compensation asked for was 1.88 crores. Expert opinion was asked from Maulana Azad Medical College, which said there is no negligence. What did the court say? The National Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission said, we note that a pre-printed and fixed informed consent cum undertaking form with blank spaces for select handwritten entries and for signatures has been used. They thought it can fit into any procedure, any doctor, and any patient. We note this to be administrative arbitrariness and one-sided high-handedness, and to be unfair and deceptive on part of the opposite party. The complaint per se was dismissed in this case, but they determined that the uniform use of pre-printed and fixed informed consent cum undertaking form on part of the opposite party to be unfair trade practice within the meaning of Section 2 of the Act 1986, and deem it just and appropriate to impose a cost of 10 lakhs not to be paid to the patient party but to be deposited in the consumer legal aid account of the commission, claiming this to be unfair trade practice. There was a lot of hue and cry which was raised following this judgment when this was publicized in newspapers, because the routine practice across the country of doctors who were taking consent was to have a pre-printed consent form with blank spaces, and this is what was termed as unfair trade practice by the National Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission. Thankfully, R.G. Stone Clinic and Laparoscopy Hospital themselves went to Supreme Court against this judgment, and the Supreme Court heard the contentions, and on 18 November 2020 stayed the direction of NCDRC order with regard to the pre-printed forms. 2021, this particular case from Punjab State Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission, the patient had a keloid under the bridge of the nose, and intralesional triamcinolone injection on the nose led to loss of vision suddenly, and this was, of course, litigated. In this judgment, there were 3 instances where withholding information was justified. This is a State Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission judgment, but I thought it important enough to be brought up here, because they have clearly specified here what is appropriate, when it is appropriate not to divulge information to the patient. The first condition is in a waiver situation, that is when patient expressly indicates that he does not want to receive further information. Second is a medical emergency, when life-saving treatment is required and patient temporarily lacks decision-making capacity. Third is, of course, therapeutic privileges, when a patient's decision-making capabilities are impaired so much that the very act of giving particular information would cause patient serious physical or mental harm. This is the area, this is the time when the doctors need to be very, very sure of what they are doing, and in fact should counsel the relatives take their consent for not giving adequate information to the patient. There are multiple other issues in consent. Who should sign the consent? Whether it should be the patient or the relatives, obviously the patient. Whether a consultant or a nurse who has taken the consent should also sign. It is the principal consultant who has to sign, and the nurse or the medical officer who has done the counseling should also sign and mention clearly the counseling has been done by so-and-so. In case of a pediatric patient, obviously one parent is more than enough. Consent for procedure which could cause sterilization, Consent both of husband and wife is important. Language of consent should ideally be the language in which the patient is comfortable with. When should consent be taken? It should not be a last minute or a sudden consent. The patient should have time to think it over. And ideally, the counseling process should be done earlier. Patient should be given a booklet regarding the procedure to go through. And when the patient comes again for surgery, that time a separate consent should be gotten signed. Role of witnesses in consent. When you're doing a high-risk surgery, yes, definitely, there is a role of witnesses in consent. Or in case of this medical tourism, or in case where the patient does not understand your language, witnesses become very important. Consent can also be taken for multi-stage treatment, like in oncology, we do chemotherapies. Can a patient refuse to get a procedure after consent? We have discussed that consent is a contract, and contract and agreement, the difference is that contract is enforceable. So is a consent enforceable? The answer to that question is very clear. The patient can withdraw the consent even while climbing on the operation table, and you have to honor that. Consent in emergency situation. Yes, if you are in a position that you will be able to prove in court that it was an emergency life-saving situation, you do not require consent, but you need to be able to be later prove in court. Consent for special requests. Cesarean jo hai, it should be done between 11 and 11:30 p.m. This is a particular date. My husband should not be told about this. Any special requests on the part of the patient or on part of the relatives, a separate consent regarding the same should be signed by them before you agree to do anything like this. There are umpteen number of incidents, and Dr. Ashwini had once very beautifully highlighted a case discussion where a patient had asked the doctors not to disclose the history of alcohol intake because of insurance reasons. And later during surgery, it was found that he was a cirrhotic and he went into liver failure following surgery. And the doctor could not prove that he was an alcoholic because he has not, in the history, he has written very clearly that no history of alcohol intake. This is something all of us understand very well, that consent is not simply an act of signing a document. It is a continuous communication. We know very well that IPC has multiple sections which protect the work that doctors do in trying, in good faith, in trying to help a person without any malicious intent, without consent. However, I have not come across any cases where these sections have been used by doctors to defend themselves where allegations of negligence have been raised. Then consent form. This particular case was, let me just, I'm unable to read this. Consent form not signed by the consultant is not valid consent. And this was a case from West Bengal State Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission. Consent takes a very, very important role when it comes to removal of ventilator, when it comes to passive euthanasia. And I don't know whether I have time to discuss all this, but this is an area where we need to spend some more time to understand what has happened from the time the Supreme Court gave the first judgment in this regard in P. Rathinam versus Union of India in 1994, followed by the case of Gyan Kaur versus State of Punjab in 1996, where it said very clearly that assisted suicide is not lawful in India, and the right to life under Article 21 does not include the right to die. Later came the Aruna Schonborg case, where this nurse who was managed in KEM hospital for 17 years, her passive euthanasia was brought to Supreme Court by people who were interested in her welfare. And In that judgment, the court has said that if an adult patient of sound mind refuses, however, unreasonably to consent to treatment or care by which his life would or might be prolonged, the doctors responsible for his care must give effect to his wishes, even though they do not consider it to be in the best interests to do so. Now,
can you make this slideshow as a bigger slide? We are seeing
on top of my. Otherwise, I was going with that only, and it was making me difficult to read the top headings. In Aruna Shanbag case, there was a particular procedure which was laid down, and this procedure was so tortuous that effectively, I think after Aruna Shanbag case, I don't think any other case this permission for passive euthanasia was taken from the courts. Following this was another case in 2018. This was the Common Cause Society versus Union of India, and they decided that no one is permitted to cause death of another person, including a physician, by administering any lethal drug, even if the objective is to relieve the patient from pain and suffering. An adult human being of conscious mind is fully entitled to refuse medical treatment, and passive euthanasia was legally permitted, though again, the procedure to be followed for this passive euthanasia, even in this judgment, is pretty convoluted, though the decision has been taken away from High Court judges to be giving a decision on that issue and given to a medical board, but then that medical board has to follow a particular procedure, and then judicial officers come into the picture. So overall, it is again a very convoluted path, and again, to my mind, I do not know any single incident which has where this procedure has been followed for passive euthanasia in India after this judgment. I stand to be corrected if anybody is aware of any such incident. What happened in Common Cause is the procedure for advanced directive or a living will to be made has been laid down, and please understand that a patient declaring somebody else is in conflict, because advanced directive or a living will has a particular way of forming a living will. It has to be signed by 2 witnesses. It has to be endorsed by a tehsildar. It is like a will you register. And simply in the consent form writing may not qualify as an advanced directive or a living will. And I am worried that like some people who are specialists in medical legal law, they have been advocating that you get it written on the consent form. My worry is getting it written on the consent form that in case of incapacitation, this particular person will be responsible for taking decisions is like an advanced will, but the procedure for advanced will laid down in the Common Cause case is something totally different. And how will you resolve this conflict if the situation so arises? Then do not resuscitate. This was one case from National Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission, where it was upheld that the consent has already been given. And the problem with these situations is not only what we expect in India, the people who are looking after the patient, the ones who are working for 2 to 3 months, and patient is on ventilator, they request, they touch the doctor's feet, please remove the patient from ventilator. Once the patient is removed from ventilator, then suddenly more relatives appear and claim that you have in cahoots with my relative killed my father. These kind of things don't happen only in India, they also happen abroad, and this was one such case which happened there. I think this judgment also basically covers what has already been given in the Napoli judgment, so I will not go through this. Non-availability of equipment. I was very surprised to find that facility to monitor methotrexate levels needs to be disclosed in consent. And Apollo Hospitals Chennai was penalized for this. Printed consent, signed consent, this patient claimed that they were not in a frame of mind when they signed it. And is that to be taken as a valid consent or not? Then similarly, consent for not taken for common complication like STRI after LASIK surgery, consent taken only for a minor procedure when FES was being done and the patient's orbit was perforated and injury occurred in the eye. Consent is needed also for oral pills and non-surgical MTP. We have consent for using drugs also, where chemotherapy was being used, and in the 5th or 6th session of chemotherapy, the patient's weight had fallen and injection adriamycin was not reduced appropriately and the patient went into congestive cardiac failure. Similarly, hormone replacement therapy started on a patient leading to infiltrative carcinoma breast. The issue was whether consent should have been taken for this. Of course, we all understand that there's no consent needed for postmortem in case of suspicious or unnatural death. And all you need to do is inform the police. And the police and the patient's relative can then decide whether they want or do not want. When taking consent, it is very, very important that consent is taken for other doctors in case the doctor who has taken the consent for doing the procedure is not going to be available after the procedure has been done. Separate consent is needed for anesthesia as well as for blood transfusion. This was a strange judgment from NCDRC. Earlier also I have discussed this, but unfortunately we have not been able to get any superior order following this. Basically in this case, the National Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission had said that you have to mention your own complication rate, not what is the complications rate given by Indian Society of Gastroenterology or American Society of Gastrointestinal Endoscopy. You have to give what was the complications in the cases that you have done. You need to take consent for a different technique if you are going to do it. And for putting a patient on a ventilator, on one side we say that in an emergency life-saving procedure, consent is not needed. On the other side, we have this judgment from 2018's State Consumer Dispute Redressal Commission, which said that consent should have been taken for putting the patient on ventilator. And what is more of an emergency than putting a patient on a ventilator? Thankfully, in 2019, we had Allahabad High Court, which came to doctors' rescue and said that if you have given a consent for surgery, it also means you have given consent for consequences. And this may be helpful in future in some cases. If the patient refuses to give consent, that also has to be documented as a refusal of consent. And can consent be taken by a qualified staff member under supervision? In India, as per Samira Kohli judgment, as so far, yes. But since we are following the Western law, we can expect, look at this in 2016. It has said very clearly a physician's duty to provide information to a patient sufficient to obtain her informed consent is non-delegatable. Informed consent requires direct communication between physician and patient and contemplates a back and forth face-to-face exchange, which may include questions that patient feels the physician must answer personally. But Samira Kohli judgment had said that the consent can be taken by a member of the team. This is 2016 judgment, and I expect in future Indian courts will also implement something like this. Consent of husband, is it necessary to conduct an MTP? Answer is no. This was Punjab and Haryana High Court, and Supreme Court on the order of Punjab and Haryana High Court had said the same thing. The consent of husband is not necessary to conduct an MTP. We have confusing laws regarding this. Video consent, this issue arises frequently. It is mandatory only under Transplantation of Human Organs Act, and it is preferable in high-risk patients. Otherwise, I do not normally recommend video consents. Consent should be taken usually in the language the patient understands. If you have a consent in English and person is signing in Marathi, obviously you are liable to get caught, and this is what happened in this particular case. Proxy consent, of course, there's a particular procedure for incompetent patients or minors where a proxy consent is taken. I'll end here. Thank you. Because I don't like Dr. Ashwini's face. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Neeraj. As usual, you have gone through the finer points and the nitty-gritty of consent. Many of us would not be aware of all the issues that you have raised. I think as you go through the cases, you could go on and on, but because of the constraint of time, you have limited yourself to the time allotted, for which we are very grateful. As Dr. Pradeep mentioned, all the three faculty today have done an outstanding job, and I'm sure that all the audience has benefited immensely from that. With this, we come to the end of today's program, and again, I remind you that tomorrow we will start at 11 a.m. sharp. Again, we have some very good talks. One is discharge cards and its medical legal importance. The second is, should doctors lead their own defense in court? And the third is emergency shifting of patients to higher center do's and don'ts. So with this reminder, I thank you once more. Have a good evening and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having us over.
Thank you.